a Nazi war criminal you've no doubt heard of. This is Klaus Barbie, the Butcher of Lyon. But today, we'll delve into how he was trapped during an interview on French television. Indeed, Klaus Barbie was the former Gestapo chief in a French city called Lyon during World War II. Welcome to Legends of the Battlefield, where each episode immerses you in the heart of history's most decisive conflicts, revealing the strategies, heroes, and moments that have shaped the world as we know it today. At the end of the conflict, like many other Nazi criminals, he managed to slip away and escape to South America. And in 1972, while giving an interview under a false name on French television, he was unmasked and trapped by journalist Ladislas Dehoyos. February 3, 1972, La Paz, Bolivia. The graying man, slightly stooped and balding, sits in his chair. Serene, with a fixed smile and piercing gaze, Klaus Altmann scrutinizes his interviewer. Facing him, Ladislas Dehoyos, a famous French journalist, nervously holds his notes. Against all odds, the veteran reporter obtained permission to interview the Bolivian national. For some time, the wild rumor had indeed circulated that Klaus Altmann was actually Klaus Barbie, a notorious ex-Nazi known for having been the head of the Gestapo in Lyon from 1942 to 1944. The criminal, responsible for the deportation of several thousand Jews and the arrest and torture of resistance members, had found refuge for more than 20 years in the South American country. That Klaus Altmann had taken refuge since his flight from Peru. The Bolivian Ministry of the Interior had agreed to the interview to quell this unfortunate misunderstanding and protect the war criminal's identity. The conditions of the interview were strict, no more than a few minutes of discussion, questions in Spanish and approved in advance. Ladislas Dehoyos was ready. In the small office, the atmosphere was tense. The cameraman received permission from one of the officials present in the room and started the recording. The interview could begin. Dehoyos delivered in Spanish the first questions approved by the authorities. Everything went as planned. Klaus Altmann formally denied being Klaus Barbie. He was a simple German national who had obtained Bolivian nationality more than 20 years ago and led a completely ordinary life, nothing more. The French journalist took a deep breath. Without warning and contrary to the rules imposed by the ministry's officers, he unexpectedly asks in French, "Have you ever been to Lyon?" To the journalist's great surprise, Altmann retorts without hesitation in German, "I have never been to Lyon." The man understood the question perfectly, which was asked in a language he is not supposed to know. The tension in the room rises. The ministry officials become restless. Something is not right. Feverish, Ladislas Dehoyos does not stop there. The French journalist then presents Klaus Altmann with photographs. In the pictures, the portrait of Jean Moulin, a famous French resistance fighter arrested and tortured to death by Barbie 29 years earlier. The German takes them and looks at them indifferently. He does not recognize the person. He hands the photographs back to Ladislas, who carefully puts them away in his jacket. Klaus Altmann has just fallen into the Frenchman's trap. By handling the photos, Altmann has left his fingerprint on the paper. If Klaus Altmann is indeed Klaus Barbie, Ladislas Dehoyos now has formal evidence. The interview continues under the watchful eyes of the guards, who allow it to proceed. Dehoyos asks Altmann to repeat a few phrases in French. "I am not a murderer. I am not a murderer. I have never tortured. I have never tortured." The German complies but struggles to hide his true face. His feigned hesitations fool no one. The interview ends and the tone escalates. The officials of the Bolivian ministry realize they have been duped. Instinctively, the cameraman Christian van Ryswyk places the film reels into a small bag, which he hands to the French consul present in the room. He urges him, "Get out of here! Go to the embassy!" When the Bolivian officers approach the cameraman demanding the film, the Frenchman complies and hands them 2 blank reels. Before leaving the room, Ladislas Dehoyos shakes hands with Klaus Altmann. The 2 men look each other in the eyes. Altmann senses that he has been unmasked. Ladislas and his cameraman rush to the French embassy, located a few hundred meters away. Upon arriving, Dehoyos bursts into tears. His mission is accomplished. The recordings and the fingerprint of Klaus Altmann are examined in France. The evidence is conclusive. Altmann and Barbie are the same person. The French journalist's trap worked. The most sought-after Nazi dignitary in France has been unmasked. November 1942, Vichy, France. After operating at several points on the front, Klaus Barbie is dispatched to France. In Lyon, he takes over the Gestapo and quickly extends his influence. The young SS officer earns a reputation and is nicknamed the Butcher of Lyon. A zealous Nazi, described as cruel and cold by his superiors, Klaus Barbie spreads terror in the city. He rounds up thousands of Jews and arrests many resistance fighters. Barbie does not hesitate to use torture to extract information from his prisoners. In 1943, he arrests Jean Moulin, the brain behind the French resistance. Barbie knows that if Moulin talks, the entire resistance will fall. The torturer redoubles his efforts, and despite the torments, Jean Moulin reveals no secrets. The resistance hero dies a few days later without having spoken. On April 6, 1944, Klaus Barbie arrests 44 Jewish children at a refugee colony in Izia and puts them on a train destined for Drancy, then to Auschwitz. On August 11th of the same year, as the Allies advance to the gates of Lyon, Barbie orders the departure of a last train to Auschwitz. The 650 people on board are sent to their deaths. The SS leader manages to flee France and ends the war in Germany. 1947 occupied Germany. Klaus Barbie joins a counter-espionage network funded by the CIC, the counterintelligence corps of the US Army. The former Nazi is noted for his good knowledge of French communist networks. While France demands the extradition of the war criminal, the CIC formally refuses. In the context of the Cold War, Barbie's knowledge is too valuable. For 4 years, the German works discreetly for the intelligence services of the US Army. In return, the American authorities ensure his protection. March 23, 1951. As France's extradition requests become increasingly insistent, the United States admits to having lost all trace of Klaus Barbie. In reality, the American Secret Services organized the exfiltration of their protege to South America, the new haven for fleeing Nazis. Through an underground network, the former Gestapo chief and his family boarded a passenger ship headed for Argentina, then moved on to Bolivia. Klaus Barbie became Klaus Altmann. Under the Bolivian sun, the man now calling himself Altmann resumed a normal life. Deep in the Amazon jungle, he managed a timber company. In the sawmill where he spent his days, he worked alongside indigenous people and Jews, those he had once considered subhuman years earlier. Yet Klaus Altmann had not forgotten his past. To facilitate the counting of wood planks, the former Nazi marked each batch of 10 with a swastika drawn in chalk. The Jewish owners of the business were puzzled by the appearance of these symbols. Furious, they confronted Altmann. "Are you a Nazi?" Cynically, the German replied, "No, no. It's a very beautiful symbol. I like this sign." Across the Atlantic, the memory of the Butcher of Lyon and his atrocities remained vivid. His name was mentioned in numerous trials, and Barbie was sentenced to death twice for war crimes in 1947 and 1954. The fate awaiting him from French justice did not disturb Altmann, who continued his rise. On October 3, 1957, Klaus Altmann officially became a Bolivian citizen. From 1964, he actively collaborated with the Bolivian army. The macabre skills acquired during his 10 years at the heart of the SS were put to use for the dictators in power. Tracking and torturing opponents, the ex-Nazi shared his expertise and climbed the ranks within the dictatorship. In 1966, his profile attracted the attention of West Germany's secret services. For a fee, Klaus Altmann informed his former homeland about the workings of the Bolivian regime. But the Bolivian citizen did not stop there. In 1971, he supported the coup d'etat by Colonel Banzer and even created a paramilitary organization to support this new dictator. Promoted to the honorary rank of colonel in the army, Klaus Altmann enjoyed such notoriety that he believed himself untouchable. Nevertheless, the new lives of former Nazis obsessed some European citizens. Serge and Beate Klarsfeld, famous Nazi hunters, were on the trail of the Butcher of Lyon. The couple, already known for several dramatic actions, had traced the former Gestapo chief. Using local intelligence and a photograph of Altmann, they brought to light the criminal's new life. By the end of January 1972, the information circulated through the French media, stirring outrage over Klaus Barbie's impunity. Informed of the scoop, journalist Ladislas Dehoyos and his team immediately departed for La Paz. After a few days of investigation, they secured an exclusive interview with Altmann and succeeded in unmasking Klaus Barbie. The film reels of the interview crossed the Atlantic in a diplomatic suitcase and were broadcast on Antenne 2 a few days later. On the television news set, victims of the Butcher of Lyon recognized him and testified. "I remember him. He took my husband, my son. He took children placed in the house." Without delay, the French government issued a request for extradition, which remained unanswered. Extradition to the Bolivians. The Bolivians have not responded and will not respond, certainly not for several months. Hear La Paz. In February 1972, President Georges Pompidou personally sent a letter to dictator Banzer, to no avail. Klaus Barbie remained untouchable. January 25, 1983. A decade after being unmasked, Klaus Barbie was finally arrested. A few weeks earlier, a regime change in Bolivia had shaken Barbie's protection. The new president, Hernan Siles Zuazo, wanted to rid himself of this cumbersome guest. At the end of negotiations and in exchange for weapons, Bolivia agreed to hand over its citizen. Klaus Barbie was arrested under the pretext of an old debt he had allegedly not settled. On February 4, 1983, the German was notified of his expulsion from Bolivian territory. Klaus Barbie was not worried. He was convinced he would be repatriated to Germany. February 5, 1983, 5:30 a.m. As the airplane door opened, Klaus Barbie heard French being spoken. His expression fell. He had not arrived in Germany as he imagined, but at Cayenne Airport in French Guiana. On the tarmac, the prefect approached him and informed him of his charges of crimes against humanity. Klaus Barbie was now officially charged. Arriving in Lyon, the man was symbolically imprisoned in a cell at Montluc, the prison where he had locked up and tortured his victims 40 years earlier. 4 years later, the trial of the Butcher of Lyon finally began. It's 1:04 p.m. this Monday, May 11, 1987. Klaus Barbie, the former chief of the Gestapo in Lyon, enters the courtroom. More than 40 years after the war, he is tried before a court of assizes for crimes against humanity. The event was of national magnitude. 900 journalists followed the trial, which was exceptionally filmed by a team that included Ladislas Dehoyos. Many victims were called to the stand to testify. People spoke out. Men and women recounted the horrible atrocities the executioner had inflicted on them. Klaus Barbie was a savage beast, you know. You can't call that a man. And what was extraordinary about Barbie, which touched us a lot, was this satanic joy he had in torturing. He really experienced extreme pleasure. The more we screamed, the more he beamed. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. The jurors in Lyon had to answer 341 questions. They answered yes to 340 of these, finding Klaus Barbie guilty of 17 crimes against humanity. They answered no to the last question. There were no mitigating circumstances for the defendant. On July 4, 1987, after 145 hours of debate, Klaus Barbie was sentenced to life imprisonment. The Butcher of Lyon was found guilty of the roundup, deportation, and death of many innocent Jews, particularly the children of Izieu. At the announcement of the verdict, a large round of applause erupted in the crowded courtroom. For the first time in its history, France convicted a man for crimes against humanity. Throughout his trial, Barbie expressed no remorse. After having sown terror in France and evaded justice for more than 4 decades, Klaus Barbie died in prison on September 25, 1991, at the age of 77. Klaus Barbie was not the only Nazi dignitary to have fled to South America after World War II. Josef Mengele, the Angel of Death, the infamous Nazi doctor from Auschwitz concentration camp, also fled to South America. And today, in this episode, we decided to focus particularly on that famous interview that helped prove the identity of Klaus Altmann, in a way, as we do in war stories, placing the small story within the big history. But it is important to remember that this interview is the conclusion of a long manhunt conducted by the Klarsfelds, Nazi hunters. Exactly. The Klarsfelds, Beate and Serge, are a couple who have dedicated their lives to the memory of the Holocaust, to the pursuit of former Nazis and those responsible for deportation. It is thanks to information obtained by the Klarsfelds that Klaus Barbie was eventually apprehended, and Ladislas Dehoyos was able to travel to La Paz to interview him. We're coming to the end of this new episode of Legends of the Battlefield. Thank you for all your comments on all the episodes. We really appreciate it. In any case, we'll see you very soon for a new story in the Great Wars, and until then, take care. Bye, everyone.